Thank you all for joining our webinar today. I'm Tom Saunders. I'm President and CEO of the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy. And let's see, we might be able to advance toward a slide that's about the Conservancy. You all may be more familiar with some of our programs like land conservation or watershed protection. But today we have speakers from our Natural Heritage Program, which works to protect threatened and endangered species, and from our Community Greening Program, which plants trees and gardens across the region. And we have a great topic for our webinar today. So we've always been interested in birds, but somehow they're playing an even more important role in our conservation work of late, because I think we're all reading and learning that climate change is having an impact on birds. Some species are declining. And so we thought this would be a good time to do a webinar that shares some of our staff's expertise about bird species and about what you all can do, we can all do to help birds. So we have two speakers today. David Yaney is an ornithologist on our Natural Heritage Program. And I come from a family where pretty much everybody in our family were ornithologists. I grew up exposed to ornithology from an early age, and in my lifetime and career, I have really never known anybody who has more expertise than David. I'll set the stage for him so he can then be under pressure to have a great presentation. But David brings, not just knowledge, but sort of thoughtfulness about all the issues, and then a background in conservation broadly and in climate, and then also a real understanding of how technology can come into assisting also with bird species and their health and their declines. Alicia Wuerl is joining us from our Community Greening Program, and that is one of the more extraordinary programs in our organization, I think, because with a staff that's not many more than a dozen people, they are doing 130 gardens around the region. We have just planted, not that I keep track by a tree, but we just planted our 40,195th tree last Friday. And we plant pollinator gardens. We do 1,000 hanging baskets and planters downtown in Pittsburgh. Just the breadth of what that staff produces is extraordinary. So before I turn this over to them, I also just want to note that if you do have questions, you can feel free to type them into the question and answer function. And if we have time at the end of the presentation, we'll go over some of those. And so with that quick intro, David, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're excited to learn about today's topics. And yeah, I would just say I love birds. So this is not just my vocation, but it's also my passion in life. So hopefully that comes through today, and hopefully you'll take home some things that you can apply in your own lives, or might learn something new about what we're doing here at the Conservancy. So today's topics, we're going to first start off by learning about why birds are important, and then we'll take a look at bird population declines and what's happening in North America. What are the major causes of bird declines as far as we know? Then we'll get to the crux of the presentation, where we'll talk about 7 simple actions that you can do in your lives to help birds. And then we'll start to wrap up by looking at what the Conservancy is doing for bird conservation projects currently, and then how you can get involved with those. Okay, so why are birds important? So birds provide a number of ecosystem services, things that help our world, run, and things that we really need to survive ourselves. So birds have an important role in clean water and nutrient cycling, seed dispersal and plant pollination, forest and agricultural pest control, and scavenging and sanitation. We also see that birds are an important component of ecotourism, and they provide some very essential benefits to human physical and mental health. So now we'll take a look at each one of those. So first of all, clean water and nutrient cycling. Birds are indicators of ecosystem health, habitat condition in general, but they're they're particularly indicators of clean water because they need clean water to survive as well. Just like humans need clean drinking water, about 60% of the water that we drink actually comes from rivers and streams, so it's surface water. So protecting bird habitat in the form of forests and wetlands preserves clean water, and as well as the habitat for the birds, and that's one reason that they're so important. So another thing that we might not think about on a daily basis is that birds, through their migratory movements, actually move nutrients, both in the forms of their bodies and their poop, their feces. So it can be a really important component of certain food webs, particularly when we talk about marine to freshwater nutrient cycling, but even within terrestrial systems too. And that nutrient cycling that they provide through their movement, through their bodies and their feces, can really have an important role in primary production of the plants within a natural community. Seed dispersal and pollination. So this is something that maybe a lot of people know about. Of course, certain birds eat berries and disperse those seeds. So frugivores, birds that are fruit eating, they will disperse seeds across a landscape. And this is a really important service that they provide in terms of plant gene flow and population dynamics of those plants within ecosystems. Also, it's an important component of vegetation recovery. In areas that are disturbed, birds can help provide the new recruits, so to speak, for the habitat recovering. And then pollination. We don't talk a lot about birds as pollinators. They're certainly not as significant as our insects. But there are birds, two groups of birds that are really the primary pollinators in North America, and that's hummingbirds, which we have one regularly occurring species here in Pennsylvania, the ruby-throated hummingbird, and occasionally we get western species vagrants, but also warblers. And I wanted to particularly highlight the Cape May warbler seen in this photo. As it is migrating at a stopover site, I snapped this photo where it's actually reaching into these flowers of gooseberry and getting the nectar. And in doing so, you can see the pollen all over its bill. And so warblers also provide an important service through pollination. Now, forest and agricultural pest control. Most of the neotropical migrants and songbirds that we know are insectivores. And so we can see that actually 96% of all North American birds are insectivores. They eat insects at some point during their life cycle, or their annual cycle, I should say. This behavior, this evolutionary adaptation helps regulate insect populations, and globally, birds consume about 400 to 500 million tons of prey per year. And this service, in turn, protects our agricultural crops and our forests from some of the extensive insect outbreaks that can occur. A couple of examples I'll point to is the coffee berry borer beetle, and this is one particular insect that can provide a lot of damage to coffee plantations within the tropical region. And it's been estimated that the pest control services of insectivores within these plantations is equivalent to about $75 to $310 per hectare per year. So that's not insignificant. In terms of forest pest outbreaks or forest insect outbreaks, we know there's a number of moth species that can defoliate tree canopies, such as the spruce budworm, elm spanworm, the spongy moth here in Pennsylvania, even cyclical tent caterpillars. And so birds like cuckoos or the evening grosbeak particularly feed on these caterpillars during the outbreak cycles and help to manage that. And particularly in Washington state, there was a study that calculated the net worth of bird control of spruce budworm outbreaks at $1,473 per square kilometer per year. So as you can see, there's a significant economic value to the pest control and insect population regulation that birds give. Scavenging and sanitation. This is actually super important. This is a really important role that if our birds that did this were to vanish, we would notice in very short time, because there would be carcasses and decomposition happening at a much slower rate throughout the landscape. So carcass removal is done primarily by corvids. So that's your jays, crows, ravens, other raptors like eagles, vultures, and gulls. In doing so, they remove pathogenic bacteria and they reduce disease transmittance. Turkey vultures in particular, some stats for you, they remove 1,000 tons of organic material per year, per bird. And so value that, if we put an economic value on that, we can estimate that's about $500,000 per year. And then if we take that up to the global level of about 13 million turkey vultures worldwide, that's about $700 million per year of a service that if we were to have to replace that with humans doing it, that's what the cost would be spread across the globe. And then one other case study, if you will, there was during the 90s and the early 2000s, a decline in vultures in India due to poisoning that happened through livestock. So the poison was transferred to the vultures through their scavenging. So there was a drop in the vulture numbers in India. This was linked actually to the 1994 bubonic plague, because that pathogen was able to spread more rapidly. Also, there were 48,000 human rabies deaths in India during that time period, and an estimated cost due to human health costs of $34 billion in that country across that period. So that just kind of brings to light just how important these scavenging and sanitation services are that birds can provide. So ecotourism, I would venture to guess that a fair number of you do some sort of recreational birding or bird watching, whether you are an avid birder and you are out making eBird checklists every day, or if you are more casual and you enjoy having backyard bird feeders and watching them while you have your morning coffee. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has shown in their most recent evaluation that there's about 96.3 million birders in the United States alone, and they have a significant economic impact with about $250 billion spent on wildlife watching, which we know is mostly birds. They spend this money on equipment, trips, bird seed, as I said, and it's an important part of our economy, being able to go and just watch birds. Also mentioned that hunting is a particularly significant part of the economy as well, hunting migratory birds. There's about 2.8 million migratory bird hunters, according to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And they spend about $45 billion a year on all hunting that might be associated with that. So next we'll talk about benefits to human physical and mental health. And so there's been kind of an explosion of studies recently looking at the impacts of being in nature on both your mental health and your physical health. And seeing and hearing birds has shown to reduce depression, stress, and anxiety. It's also been shown to increase mental restoration and recovery from very stressful or traumatic events, and will promote a positive emotional response. You're often filled with gratitude or compassion after a period of observing birds. And there's studies that have actually measured this. Birding often involves hiking and walking, and we all know that's physical exercise, which benefits your physical health. Then there's also social benefits, which I think came to light during the pandemic, right? So social benefits of birding, it was a good way for people to get outside and see each other. It reduced loneliness and sharpens your memory and boosts cognitive skills by interacting with other humans while you're also interacting with birds. So birds can provide a huge boost to our health. Now we'll transition to talking about, okay, so we know all of these reasons that birds are important. Well, what happens if we lose a significant number of those birds? And unfortunately, that's what's happening right now. In 2019, there was a landmark paper that was written in Science, and it showed that we've lost 3 billion birds across North America since 1970. And that amounts to a net decline in bird abundance of about 29%. The figure out in the upper right corner here breaks that down by habitat, kind of bird habitat assemblage, and the only three of these assemblages have seen increases: water birds, dabbling ducks, and diving ducks, and then your geese and swans. And that's due to a lot of the wetlands conservation work that occurs through through the various acts and the collection of fees through the duck stamp, for example, the federal duck stamp. But then if you start to look at all the other habitats, from western forest birds to eastern forest birds to shorebirds, grassland birds, and then this list of species, which I'll talk about in a minute, called tipping point species that are really at risk. We're talking significant declines in the number of birds within each of those groups. And so for Pennsylvania, I wanted to highlight three of these groups. The eastern forest birds, that's kind of self-explanatory, right? We're in the east. We have primarily a forest matrix across the lands. And what we've seen is a 17% population loss in eastern forest birds. And we'll take the wood thrush, for example, which is one of our ostensibly one of our most common forest interior species. We've lost 6 out of 10 wood thrushes since 1970. For boreal forest birds, which we have boreal remnant, if you will, or boreal refugia kind of habitat in Pennsylvania, our conifer forests can be a place where we find a lot of boreal birds. A third of those, of all boreal birds, have been lost since 1970, with about 500 million boreal forest birds lost in total. Evening grosbeak, which is a species we have a focused project on, has declined by over 90% since 1970. That's a bird that frequented people's feeders during the wintertime here in Pennsylvania. And if you ask anybody that was around during the 80s or early 90s, they'll say, well, I haven't seen any evening grosbeaks. And this is why, because they've had more than a 90% population loss. Then we've got grassland birds, which we've lost 53% of those birds since 1970. And it's actually 75% of all grassland bird species are declining. And for example, the eastern meadowlark, which again, one of our most common grassland bird species, 3 out of 4 of those birds since 1970 are now gone. So why is this decline happening? I'll talk about two classes of reasons. First, direct mortalities, and then causes that are more indirect and harder to measure. So there have been some studies that have been able to quantify direct mortalities. And we can look at cats, windows, and vehicle collisions, and then industrial collisions, a smaller portion, as the primary killers of birds in terms of direct mortalities. And so cats are something that is a non-native species. They're instinctive predators, and we're talking about free-roaming outdoor cats that cause more than 2.5 billion bird deaths annually in North America. Then we take a look at windows, and in particular, break that down by different building types. So low rises, those are kind of your commercial building types, residences, and then high rises like we see downtown. Actually, the majority of bird mortalities due to window collisions is at those low-rise buildings and residences. So on our homes, the glass on our homes, when we're not home, birds are hitting them because that surface is transparent, it's reflective, and then at night they're probably getting disoriented and then leading to some additional collisions that occur during early morning hours when birds are finishing migration. And then, of course, there's the road collisions that happen with vehicles. And I'll just note that this number is more than 500 million birds from this 2015 study, but there's a recent paper that just came out last month that's suggesting that mortalities could be maybe 2 to 8 times higher than that. in terms of what we see here in North America. So I said we had direct causes and indirect. So these might actually, it's probable that these causes are resulting in more mortalities than these direct mortality causes that we can actually measure, but it's just difficult to quantify. Habitat loss and habitat degradation in particular influence bird populations in ways that we have trouble measuring. Sometimes we're able to measure experimentally if we have treatments of an undisturbed area with a disturbed area, and we can see what the response is from bird populations, but often we don't know. We have significant habitat loss from the conversion of forests and wetlands and natural habitats to human development, urban areas, as you see in this photo here in the upper right. And then we have habitat degradation, which I've shown in 3 different ways across the bottom here. Just disturbance here on the left with some off-road use of ATVs, dirt bikes, the fragmentation of forests from resource extraction, and then we have on the right here this wall of multiflora rose, which is an invasive plant species that can greatly reduce the condition of our natural habitats. And then we have pesticides here. This is a photo of seeds that are coated with neonicotinoids, which is the most commonly used insecticide now. And a few more slides we'll talk about in a little more detail how that affects birds, but it's both through direct poisoning as well as transmitted throughout the flow of materials through an ecosystem. And so from all of these bird declines and the landmark paper, we had this group called the Road to Recovery, R2R shown here, which was created to develop this list of tipping point species, which includes 112 birds that are they're mostly birds that aren't listed on endangered or threatened lists, but they are at just the brink of that. So these are birds that have a high vulnerability to extinction. They have either steep or rapid population declines, and they have a high urgency in that if we don't do something now, they're likely to be added to one of those lists or be extirpated or extinct from some areas. So now let's get to the part where what can we do in our own lives to help birds and to help try to mitigate and reverse these declines. So this is where we have 7 simple actions, and these also come from the 3 Billion Birds Lost campaign as a result of the landmark paper. But we'll go through these in a little bit more detail. But they include making windows safer both day and night, keeping cats indoors, planting natives and reducing native plant species, and reducing area of lawn, avoiding pesticide use, drinking bird-friendly coffee, reducing single-use plastics, and then participating in community science. So making windows safer at night. This is day and night. This is a big one because that's the second leading cause of direct mortalities. So during the day, as you can see in this photo, the window, so this is a bird this is a song sparrow that died hitting this window, and you can see that it's reflective and transparent, and there is a plant on the other side of the window. Those are 3 factors that make windows deadly for birds. So you want to work on reducing that reflection and transparency. And so what you need to do is apply a treatment to the outside window surface following a 2-inch by 2-inch rule. So this could be a type of tape, film, paint, or string curtains called Acopian bird savers, but you need to have spacing of those materials by 2 inches wide by 2 inches high, because at a greater spacing than that, a bird will see that as a space that it can fly through, and it will not recognize it as a solid surface. And you also need to cover the entire window area. At night, light pollution that we have from our homes, from street lights, that disorients migrating birds that are migrating at night, which is the majority of our neotropical migrant songbirds. So it's essential that you turn off all the lights you don't need from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. during the heights of spring and fall migration, which is is now for spring, and then fall is September through October primarily. So what are some of the window solutions available? There are many, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but you could visit the American Bird Conservancy website, and you could find Acopian bird savers, feather-friendly decals, window films that are very artistic you can have applied. You can even just put your insect screens back in. So there are a lot of options, and the main point is that you do something. And even if you think that, oh, birds aren't hitting my window, I guarantee you they're hitting your windows and you might not even realize it. So other ways that you can go ahead and do a better job of keeping birds safe at your home is by looking to bird migration forecasts. Like maybe you have lights that you want to keep on some of the time at home, but then there's particular nights that you should just shut them off from that 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. period, because it's going to be a period of a night of high migration. So if you visit the Birdcast website, you can see a map that uses radar to help predict whether or not you're going to see a high number of birds migrating through your area. So this is what was predicted for this night, with 231 million birds predicted to be moving. We can see throughout the center of the country is going to be the hottest area with the most birds moving through, with some lower densities here in Pennsylvania. And what you can also do is go a step further if you go to Birdcast, and you can get a migration alert. And you can put in your city, you can put in your county to see exactly what's coming through for your area. And it'll give you a 3-night migration forecast. And this is essentially a lights out alert. So you could be like, okay, well, there aren't that many birds coming through, the 23rd, the 24th, but it's a medium on April 25th tonight. Maybe I want to make sure, put extra effort into shutting those lights off through the night period and help those birds have a better chance of having a successful migration. Keeping cats indoors. This can be a delicate subject, but here's my cat, Lynx, and he's very happy inside. The number one cause of direct bird mortality in North America, as I said, is outside free roaming cats. Cats are non-native instinctive predators. Even if their bellies are full, they're still going to want to catch, or they're not even wanting, it's their instinct to catch and kill prey items, whether it's small mammals or birds or small reptiles, amphibians, depending on where you are. But we're talking about birds here. It's a huge cause of direct bird mortality. And what can you do to keep your cat from hurting those birds and keep birds safe? You can also keep your cat healthier by keeping them inside. And if you really want to get them outside, you can create a catio, which is kind of an outdoor enclosure for your cat to still get that fresh air. You could take your cat out for walks in a harness, a backpack, or stroller. You can make sure you give them more indoor enrichment with toys that kind of allows them to get out that instinctive energy to kill. And you can also, if you're trying to train an outdoor cat to come inside, you could look into some anti-predation devices such as collars that are brightly colored, or make some noise, like with bells that can make them less sneaky and less good at their job of killing birds. So yeah, I really urge you, if you have a cat, consider its health and the bird's safety to keep it inside. So next, let's talk about planting native species and reducing your lawn. And just some simple facts. There's about 40 to 50 million acres of lawn in the United States, and these areas are essentially ecological deserts. They are not supporting a diversity of insects. They are not providing host plants for a diversity of prey species for birds, and they're not providing any sort of habitat structure. So what you can do is convert that lawn, and maybe it happens slowly, but convert that lawn by adding native plants, which are going to provide shelter and nesting areas and that vegetation structure for birds. They can also provide nectar, berries, and seeds, so food for birds, and in terms of plant foods. And then, most importantly, it's going to increase the insect prey for birds, and not only insect prey for birds, but for the ecosystem health in general. Oh, I guess I did want to mention this is a photo of before and during and after of one of our friends, Lauren Nagoda, who lives in the Pittsburgh area. She moved into a new house and she had this fully grass lawn, and she was able to take it from this ecological desert to a native plant garden and sanctuary where she gets many species of invertebrates, bees, moths, and then birds. She's recorded over 75 bird species since she's increased her native plant percentage in her yard. Two other tools you can look at in terms of deciding what to plant is the Audubon Native Plants Database, which I've got the link for you there. This is a great resource. You can plug in your zip code, and it will bring up the plants that are best to be planted within your area. And you can also sort for different types of bird species that you want to benefit, and it can give you advice on what those are going to provide. Like, for example, this first one listed here is serviceberry, and it's going to be a shrub or tree that provides fruit, serves as a host plant for butterflies and a nectaring source, and provides caterpillars for a variety of bird species. Now, our Natural Heritage Program also has a tool that's really directed at site restoration, but you could use it for your yard too. If you go on to our website and put in your location, you can find out what natural plant community would have been occurring at your house, and you get another list of plant species that you could add to your yard, and how frequently they would have been occurring within that community type. And you can see for this example, which was just the Pittsburgh office for WPC, sugar maple, white wood aster, red maple, Virginia creeper are some of the plants that you might want to increase in abundance within a red oak mixed hardwood forest that would have been there naturally. I'll let Alicia jump in here and provide some more tips on this.
Yeah, thanks, David. So I'm the Community Forestry Project Coordinator with the West Pennsylvania Conservancy. So I'll obviously give a good shout out to trees when we're talking about planting natives and supporting bird habitat, because trees are extremely important to help birds thrive in these areas. And for the projects that I work within our Community Gardens and Green Space team, the two major projects we plant trees through are Tree Vitalize Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh Redbud Project. We also do some tree plants. We've been branching out of that range, but mostly we're focused in the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. We've been branching a little further outside of Allegheny County. We do tree plantings in a multitude of areas. We do them in natural areas. The big thing is they're happening in public spaces. So we also have public parks. And we do a lot of trees within urban areas, like in this picture here, in these tree lawns, in these, we call them tree pits that are cut out of the sidewalks in front of people's homes. And I really wanted to shout out to these sites because I feel like our urban areas that we're planting in are very, very unique. And I'm sure a lot of you who are on here know there's many, many benefits to having trees in anywhere, but especially in urban spaces. They provide a lot of benefits. And providing for the ecosystem around us is a very big one, and in particular, birds. So as David mentioned, obviously these plants and these trees are providing a lot of shelter and food for these birds. There's also a benefit to the trees too, right? Of these birds coming by and eating the seeds of the trees and helping spread them. But one big one as well that David did hint at is that when birds are migrating, these cities and these urban areas can be very disorienting for them. So having trees in these urban areas and having a nicely established tree canopy can be a big help to the birds. That way they have somewhere that they can hang out, take shelter, get food in the process of them migrating. So we talk a lot about in our community forestry department about increasing tree canopy in these areas, especially areas where it's very, very low. So we like to remember that it's not only benefiting us as humans, but it's providing a lot of benefits to the wildlife around us. And sometimes it can be easy to forget that we do have a lot of wildlife around us in these urban spaces. So planting native trees in these urban environments is very, very important. There's a whole plethora of trees that we plant. I have a few listed there, being oak, serviceberry, redbud, and pine. Those are just a few. But the big one that I really want to shout out to are the oak trees. because oaks are like the powerhouse of trees for many ecological benefits. And especially for birds, one of the really cool things about oaks is they're a really great host tree for caterpillars and moths, which are a great food source for birds. So I don't personally have the space in my yard, but if you have space in your yard for an oak, I feel like that's the best bang for your buck tree that will give you so many benefits. We do plant oak trees with our projects. It's just a matter of making sure there's enough space because they do grow up to be very, very large trees. So in the instance that you can't do an oak, we recommend doing something smaller like a redbud or a serviceberry because they still provide many, many benefits. I also want to shout out there that, when we do plant in natural areas and riparian areas through our projects as well. It's not only urban areas, but in any case, we're making sure we're doing those native trees and native plantings. We want to make sure that we're benefiting that native fauna, providing that space for them. As David mentioned, invasives are a huge problem. So we do want to reduce invasive plants whenever and wherever we can. And we've had a number of projects where we have gone in with volunteers and partners and reduced invasive plants, removed them, and then reestablished them with beautiful native plantings to hopefully bolster that ecological benefit there. And the last thing I'll say before passing it back off to David for a bit is I want to mention the Audubon Society that he mentioned. The Audubon Society of Western Pennsylvania actually has a certified backyard habitat program that they've been working with individuals where you can connect with them, let them know you want to convert your lawn over to more bird-friendly habitat, and they can help give you a lot of resources and information and help source plants and how to do that in your yard. And then also a partner, Tree Pittsburgh, they are a local nonprofit. They grow trees from seeds that they harvest within the city. They're a really great program if you want trees for your yard. Our programs that we plant through, we don't have the means to plant in people's backyards and things. We're focusing on public spaces, but Tree Pittsburgh does tree giveaways in communities to supply container-sized trees that you can then plant in your yards. So it's a really great program to kind of give you the power to increase your tree canopy and things in your yards. And they can also help with what types of trees would be best in those areas and also thinking of natives. So I always like to shout out our partners because a lot of this work doesn't happen without us all working together to improve these spaces.
Great, thanks, Alicia. So the next action that you can take is avoiding pesticides. And I mentioned earlier, these neonicotinoids are now the most widely used pesticide that you can find in insect spray, seed treatments, flea treatments for your pets, even soil drenches. And I mentioned there's two ways that they can really affect birds in a negative way, and that's by killing birds directly if they're eating the seeds that have spilled on the ground that have been coated in neonicotinoids, or by decimating invertebrate prey. And so this is a big reason why a lot of our aerial insectivores, chimney swifts, swallows, nighthawks may be declining because we've had this mass loss in aerial insects. So you want to avoid pesticides with the neonics and also try to avoid foods that are grown with neonicotinoids. So I provided here, you can see kind of how the process of how neonicotinoids can get into the environment and can kill birds, but can also poison or kill off their food supplies. And then you can turn to this Bee Protective Center for Food Safety resource that'll give you a list of pesticides that you want to avoid. So that's one resource that I point you toward. And as much as you can, just try avoid using those around your home and garden. Next thing is drinking bird-friendly coffee. I think probably most of us have some coffee at some point in the day or during the week. And unfortunately, about 75% of the coffee that's grown worldwide is farmed in the sun. However, this is in areas where there should be rainforest. And so this means there's rainforest removal. And for this type of agriculture, there is a heavy use in pesticides and fertilizers. And this is also being done in the regions where most of our breeding birds, our neotropical migrants, are spending their winters and actually the majority of their year. Because when you think about it, if birds are migrating from South America to breed up here in Pennsylvania, They might be here May, June, July, August, and then in September, they're starting to head back south. So they might spend 1/4, 1/3 of the year here on their breeding grounds, where most of the year is spent in their wintering areas. And so if forests are being removed for sun growing coffee plantations, that's really, really bad for birds. So what you can do is you can use certified shade grown coffee. The best would be to buy coffee that's certified as bird friendly by the Smithsonian. Now, it is a little bit harder to get this for some coffee growers, and that can provide a barrier. But there's also Rainforest Alliance, which is another fairly good certification that you can get for your coffee. Then also you can do some of your own research and look really into like specific, if there's a specific brand of coffee you love to drink, look into it. See, is the coffee that the beans that they're using to make the coffee shade grown, and take that into consideration. Next is something we've probably been hearing, so much about, is just reducing our use of single-use plastics. So just straightforward, we should try to avoid using plastic bags and wraps, plastic bottles that are disposable utensils, and straws as much as possible. I have this unfortunate image here of a Laysan albatross. Our seabirds, even though we're not a coastal state, our plastics end up in the ocean. And these birds, often there's an odor that develops with the plastic that smells like food, and they eat the plastic, and obviously it's not a good result. These birds cannot survive with a body full of plastics. So we also can recycle smarter. Try not buying some of the plastics that aren't really able to be recycled, like number 3s to number 7. But also look at your own municipality or your own area and see what's recycled. And then you can also use reusable bags, bottles, and drink tap water. Whoops, skipped a little bit there. So the final action is getting involved with community science. So there's 4 different ways I'm going to point you to right now. You can go on to eBird and contribute your bird observations. It's free to sign up for, and I'll tell you, as an ornithologist in the Natural Heritage Program, data from eBird is very important to conservation planning and habitat conservation for birds here in Pennsylvania. We've just started the 3rd Pennsylvania Bird Atlas, which will be going on for the next 5 years to catalog where birds are breeding or wintering throughout the state. So you could check that out online and get involved there. iNaturalist is another great online platform for recording nature observations. And again, free. You can take a photo, location, time, and submit an observation. And then finally, this weekend, starting tomorrow, is actually the City Nature Challenge. And the Pittsburgh region participates in this. And the website is run by the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, where you can find out more about getting involved with the City Nature Challenge. So as we get to wrapping up here with the presentation, we want to highlight a few of the bird conservation projects at WPC. And I'll just say broadly, many projects occur across programs that are really aimed at protecting bird species of greatest conservation need. This is kind of our highest umbrella of birds that need conservation in Pennsylvania, identified by the state's Wildlife Action Plan. So one project we had recently was a Crawford County marsh bird survey at State Game Lands 213 and 214. We worked with the Pennsylvania Game Commission and also received funding through the Wild Resources Conservation Program. And it was the most comprehensive survey ever of the largest marsh complexes in Pennsylvania, totaling about 5,700 acres of wetland. And it was designed to complement the Game Commission's 2020 statewide volunteer survey. We counted a lot of birds in this project and a lot of species, and those included 27 of our bird species of conservation concern. And the main goal was to provide some habitat conservation recommendations. And this composite figure here essentially is showing the importance of cattail cover as it increased to a level above 50% cover. We saw kind of starting to see maximizing benefits for least bitterns, marsh wrens, and Virginia rails in terms of their occurrence and their abundance. We also mapped all the habitat types, which you see in the lower right here. And we're able to provide those highly detailed maps to the Game Commission for their management of those sites. I also mentioned that we have this Evening Grosbeak project, which we're calling the Evening Grosbeak Continental Conservation Project. This is one of those road to recovery projects that is a pilot species project where we were tasked with forming an Evening Grosbeak working group and essentially continuing some research that we began in Pennsylvania in 2017, expanding it to the entire range to track individual grosbeaks, following them using new technology, radio nanotags, and now satellite transmitters that will help us study the full annual cycle ecology and identify limiting factors in the decline of evening grosbeaks. And we're going to do this following this process that Road to Recovery has laid out, where we're kind of starting with a species that's at the bottom or to the far left here of their progression by starting to identify the key causes and actions that are needed for conservation, moving all the way up through taking those actions and implementing them and hopefully achieving sustainable recovery. This slide doesn't really do the project justice because there's so many cool things happening with this, but here you see one of our male evening grosbeaks tagged here in Pennsylvania with a 2.5 gram satellite transmitter, and you've got tracks here for 16 birds that were tracked over a period from 2022 to 2023, and basically wherever you see the pin, that's the endpoint. So we tag these birds on the wintering grounds at feeders, and we're able to follow where are they going, where are they stopping over, where are they spending the breeding season, and we'll be able to use this information to identify areas of high importance, to look at landscape use and what sort of bottlenecks there might be in terms of what's happening for habitat management, and other areas that are just important places for the species to stop over. So never before have we been able to get this level of detail for full annual cycle information on a bird of this size. Then we're moving on to our Allegheny Bird Conservation Alliance work. This is a partnership that we formed in 2016 with all the partners listed here under a National Fish and Wildlife Federation Foundation grant. And it really came together as we certified Pittsburgh as an urban bird treaty city that is essentially working toward all of those actions, but kind of at a larger scale within our region. And so the primary goal is to bring together these organizations that do things separately, but to bring them together through collaborative bird conservation in the region. And there's the website if you want to see some of the projects that we've been doing through the Allegheny Bird Conservation Alliance. One project in particular that we have going on currently is a DCNR C2P2 funded project where we've been assessing the birds and plant communities across 5 properties that are managed by those ABCA partners. And those include Tom's Run Nature Reserve, which is WPC's property, Frick Park, Beechwood Farms, Dead Man's Hollow, and Churchill Valley Greenway, the latter 2, which are properties managed by the Allegheny Land Trust. And so we did bird assessments, plant community mapping, and now we're implementing forest habitat restoration in important areas at these sites. And I'll let Alicia talk a little bit more about that at our Tom's Run property.
Yeah, so when David came across this project, they were looking at Tom's Run. He contacted myself and our forester to talk about trees and tree planting and restoring some habitat. So myself and David and our forester and our director of land stewardship and our director of natural heritage program ecologist, we all took a hike, and admittedly it's a fun day of work when you get to go hiking for work through the forest. And we hiked along Tom's Run and looked for some areas. I think David had some spots in mind based off of the field work he did, and kind of scoped out some areas on where we felt like habitat restoration was needed. Particularly, you're looking for holes in the tree canopy, areas where the invasives may be particularly bad, things along that nature. And we found 2 sites that we wanted to focus on. One was on an upland site up a steep hillside And another was down closer to one of the main trails that goes through Tom's Run. If you've been there, it's actually that first trail you're going to go on, the more wider kind of gravelly trail. It was a more riparian area. And the focus was that there are three birds listed here, the Kentucky warbler being one of them, that are species of greatest conservation need. So we were thinking a lot about those, but we were also just thinking about generally that we're restoring this area for everything that's living there. We want to restore it with native trees, native habitat, thinking about, you know, doing trees and shrubs. So you're not only increasing tree canopy in those open areas, but also making sure you have a nice shrub layer and down through there. So it's thinking about the area as a whole, even though obviously we were thinking a little more birds initially. We did do a nice variety of trees. So there were many, but some of the ones that I'll mention, you know, we talked about serviceberry earlier, that was done. Popcorn beam, hickories are really great, tulip tree, some maples. So a nice variety of trees were planted. They actually were just planted this past Saturday on April 20th. We did 185 trees. They were all smaller restoration trees, but the volunteers were very excited and we had beautiful weather. So they did get all the trees in the ground. We weren't sure if we were going to have another event in our hands, but they busted it out. The weather was just so beautiful. So I think this is going to be a very successful site. I'll be really interested to go back in the future and see how it's looking. Hopefully, maybe David will take me out and we'll go look for some birds and see it actually in action. But I think it's an exciting project, and I look forward to seeing how a lot of the other ones come together as you guys do them.
And so an outgrowth of this very project is a new project that we are just starting this year, which is MAPS banding at Tom's Run Nature Reserve and our Bear Run Nature Reserve. And so this is a partnership project with Bird Lab, which is one of our ABCA members. And this is, like I said, an outgrowth of the C2P2 project, but also an outgrowth of a discovery that we made together with Bird Lab last year at Bear Run Nature Reserve, where we confirmed the first ever breeding population of Swainson's warbler in Pennsylvania. And so this is a southern species that has occurred in Pennsylvania occasionally in migration, never been confirmed, but we did capture this juvenile, which you see banded here on the lower right, and that was the confirmation of this population. So it's important to monitor that population, and we were successful in getting funding from Wild Resources Conservation Program to fund this project, which is the Monitoring Avian Productivity and Survivorship program, so MAPS. So there will be 2 banding stations established, one at each of those sites, where we'll be doing breeding season bird banding. We'll be collecting demographic data that'll give us information on the productivity of these birds, recruitment and survival of these bird species, and it'll be able to factor into, funnel into a giant, you know, data set that's across the country that's used to answer important conservation questions about bird populations. So we're really excited about this project that's just getting going now. And I'll turn it back over to Alicia as we wrap up, and we'll talk about ways to get involved. And Alicia, go ahead.
Yeah. So aside from all the really awesome stuff that, you know, you guys can do at home to help make these differences, we also want to mention that just coming out to volunteer with us is a way to get involved and learn and come get your hands dirty with us. We always have events throughout the year. I'm obviously going to plug our tree plantings because I'm the tree lady, but we're wrapping up our spring planting season. It's almost over. We'll be planting again in the fall. Our garden plantings will be kicking up. And then there's also a lot of riparian tree plantings coming up in early May here through our watershed department. So I would encourage you looking for those. And then we mentioned about Tom's Run. So our land stewardship department, they're always doing a lot of really great work with invasive removal, habitat restoration, like we've talked with those plantings, some trail work on our WPC properties and other places. So that's another really great way to get involved. And then I'll also say falling water and even office work. You know, our work does not happen without volunteers, and I say that all the time, and I genuinely mean it. So if you feel like you want to come out and hang out with us and have some fun, the link is on the bottom there. And then I'll also mention, Dave, if you want to go to the next slide, we also can't do this work without our WPC members and our donors. So, you know, if you're feeling like you'd like to donate to support our work, the link is down there. We would appreciate it. But mainly we just appreciate you guys being here today. We'd love to see you out in the field or or through our member services, you know, in the future.
Thanks. And then one more plug here before we get to our final slide. I'd like to invite you to join us for World Migratory Bird Day, which is on May 11th this year. We're going to have a special bird hike at Tom's Run Nature Reserve to see some of that planting that has been done and to look for neotropical migrants. We'll be meeting at the parking area at 7:30 a.m. And the way this one is working, we do have registration for this hike, and all of you webinar attendees are going to get the first opportunity to register with a link that's going to be emailed to you tomorrow. So with that, we want to thank you for watching, and here's a bunch of different ways to get in contact with us. Email addresses for myself and Alicia, other places you can check us out on social media, and both WPC and the Natural Heritage Program. And now I'd like to invite Jen Samusky to come on and lead our question and answer session.
Great, thanks, David. Thanks, Alicia. That was fantastic. I'm going to jump right in because we have a lot of comments and questions for you guys. First of all, lots of thank yous for the webinar. So, and I would just want to thank everybody for attending, and I hope that you got some great information from this. Let's see. Somebody commented, and I think this is great information. The Audubon Society of Western Pennsylvania has its native plant sale on May 11th in Fox Chapel. So if you're looking for native plants for your garden or your yard, check that out on May 11th at the Audubon Society in Fox Chapel. Let's see, we have several questions. Will you be doing bird research on the newly protected forest in Elk County at the Clarion Junction project?
Will we be doing research that, I mean, no, there's nothing planned right now, but it's always on the table that it could be, you know, be something that we're going to look at in the future.
Okay, great. Should window coverings be in place year round or only during migration?
Good question. Year round, because it's not only the migratory birds that are having direct mortalities, but also the birds that are here, you know, year-round residents like cardinals and Carolina wrens and the American robins that might nest in your backyard. So yep, year round.
I have read that feeding birds in bird feeders causes changes in migration and increases bird illness. Is this correct?
Okay, well, that's a it's kind of a complex question. But bird feeding is not going to disrupt migration. Will it augment natural food sources? Yes. Does it, what was the other part of the question?
Does it cause illness?
Illness. Okay, so illnesses, right. So that's, yeah, you have to feed birds kind of the right way, which is keeping your bird feeders clean. And there are some really good instructions that you can find online in terms of proper cleaning, the regularity of that, you know, using a bleach solution, that sort of thing. You can also watch for disease at your feeders. If you see particularly finches, goldfinches, house finches are susceptible to salmonella, and as well as conjunctivitis that's caused by bacteria. And so if you see birds that start to get like swollen eyes or birds that are puffed up, then you can kind of, you know, take a note that there's probably some pathogens on your feeders, and it'd be a good time to clean them.
Okay, great. You mentioned a bird habitat study in wetlands, and I think you said that bird population increased with increasing cattails. Were the cattails native cattails, or were they invasive, which turned into a monoculture?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, both species of cattails were included in that. We weren't differentiating, and those two species also hybridize. Cattail cover can be, you know, definitely a monoculture, but some of that is the habitat that those secretive marsh birds, the rails, need. So it's important to have an adequate mix of that with the other wetland habitat types, such as aquatic floating vegetation, wetland shrub wetland, which can occur in a variety of community types. But certain species do need that. And like the least bittern, which is a state endangered bird, particularly benefits from cattail.
Okay. Is the dramatic increase in geese and swans compared to many other species losses at all problematic or indicative of any ecological problems?
Again, that's a tricky question. The indicative. So yeah, I mean, certainly some species can be problematic. Canada goose populations, particularly the residential Canada goose populations, can become a nuisance for certain municipalities, for certain like schools, sports fields, that sort of thing. Even like snow goose populations that have continued to explode are really having an impact on tundra habitat and overgrazing. So yeah, I mean, that's where really the only regulation of those populations now is hunting.
Okay. Boy, there's a lot of thank yous here. There was oh, do you think that I'm not pronouncing it right. I just stumbled over the word. Neo sorry.
The
Neonics.
neonicotinoids.
Thanks. Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
the neonics, yeah.
Will they do you think they'll ever be banned?
Will they ever be banned? That I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question, but there's certainly a problem, and the best thing we can do right now is not use them in our small ways, in our houses. But in terms of getting them out of big agriculture, it's going to be tough.
Okay. What's the best thing for me to do if I find an injured bird?
If you find an injured bird, yes. So an injured bird, first of all, you want to make sure you know that it's injured. So is it showing something like drooping wings, puffed up, like it has malaise, that sort of thing. So you determine it is injured, then you're going to want to contact a certified wildlife rehabilitator. And if you're in Pennsylvania, you want to go to the website for the Pennsylvania Association of Wildlife Rehabilitators, and you can click on your county, and it'll give you a list of who is qualified to help with that bird, and they'll walk you through the process of getting it to them. Yeah.
Okay. And one last question. It's a little bit after 1 o'clock, so we're going to wrap up. One last question for you, David. If I have a bird building a nest above my door frame, can I move it? And where's the best place to move it to? And what if there are eggs in it?
Yeah, so that's a question we get a lot. You actually aren't allowed to move those nests. So once they're occupied, they have to stay put. That's under the protection of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. That's been around for quite a while now. And yeah, you have to leave it and just basically try to adapt. If it's in a location that's a lot of disturbance for you coming and going, obviously you have to keep coming and going out of that door, and the birds might eventually abandon it. But you got to leave it in place, especially if there's eggs in it. You have to leave it in place. In fact, right now I have an American robin nest right above my porch light, that's next to my door. And every year they'll build it there, and some years they'll be successful, and some years they won't. But I've been watching all week this female robin just building and building and building, and before long, next week there'll be probably three or four eggs in that nest.
Well, that's fun to watch. So the answer is live in harmony.
Yes, live in harmony, exactly.
Okay, that's about all for now. We're going to wrap up. It's 5 after 1, and thank you everybody for sticking with us, and thanks Alicia and David for such great information. And join us, keep an eye out on our website for more webinars upcoming.